It is such a pleasure to be here, and I also just, so many have said it, it's just so special to be here and to be talking about topics that are so close to all of our hearts. This is a remarkable panel, you will see in a minute. Just the expertise among the three of you on women's health, on access to care, on reproductive rights and policy, on the caring economy, it's just extraordinary. I want to acknowledge that the third sentence of our intro was about authoritarian governments restricting women's health. And of course, it's just one tool in the authoritarian toolbox. And I think we've talked a lot about other rights. But one of the things that authoritarian governments do is they exploit fear of human sexuality and expression, and that has vast repercussions for women's health. And there was a wonderful panel that Global Health Visions and IPAS, PMNCH, and Planned Parenthood Global held yesterday, really placing women's health in the context of other rights that authoritarian governments often restrict. So just to acknowledge that. And of not only women, but of other intersecting communities. So for this panel, we're going to really talk about how governments can weaponize and restrict women's health, restricting access to abortion, to family planning, to contraception, all healthcare services, and do it in a way that you each can tell the stories and your own personal stories of how you've come to this work and how you're working, each of you in different ways, tirelessly on raising women's voices to ensure access to care. So let me start with you, Petra. I admitted that I did a deep dive on your resume, and it's quite extraordinary, the work that you've been doing for so long. You are widely recognized as a member, not only of the Austrian Parliament, but of working with the IPU and other parliaments, especially in Africa, on women's rights, on sexual health, and on global development. Your accolades list is too long for a 20-minute panel, but let me start by asking you to give us a little bit of a context of what you're seeing in Europe and other countries, as governments start to restrict more and more women's health.
Yes, indeed, we had just elections in Austria end of September, and it was the first time that the far right-wing party that we have in Austria became number one with 28.8%. They are not yet in government. We are negotiating about government structures, and I really try to avoid to have them in government, because we see, when we look into other countries in the region, what happens if they have to say. For instance, in Poland, where abortion was more or less totally banned, with the consequence that when a woman was seeking help and an abortion was absolutely medically necessary, doctors didn't dare to perform the abortion because they were afraid to be sued at the end. And so we saw many women die from that. Or when we look to Hungary, my neighbor country in the east, where it's totally forbidden to speak about LGBTIQ. Both in you cannot sell a book in a bookshop where a gay couple appears, or you cannot speak about sexuality education at school because it's totally banned. And of course that's crazy. We know that young people need to know about their bodies, need to know about their rights, and need to know how to say no if there is something happening that they do not want. And we also see it in Turkey. To conclude with my list of countries, I want to mention Turkey left the Istanbul Convention, which is the gold standard to combating violence against women. And they have an increasing number of femicides, but nevertheless they left it, just because there could be also some other issues mentioned that they do not want to have tackled. And that in the conclusion, I think we can say whenever fundamentalists or extremists, be them ideologically or be them religious fundamentalists or extremists, they are never in favor of women's rights. They are always undermining the autonomy, and we can see crazy coalitions, for instance, among the Vatican, the Holy See, and Saudi Arabia when it is to undermine our rights. So we have to stop them as soon as they appear, because we already know their agenda and we already know how it will end up.
And we'll come back to also where it hits very close to home for those of us who have just experienced the American election. But let me turn to you, Blessing. You have an extraordinary story. It's just a remarkable story of coming from being a chemical engineer in Fortune 100 companies in the United States to now founding companies in Africa that are not only working toward access to care and women's health, but really redefining the care economy. So tell us about your journey and how you pivoted to that.
Well, my career, I always joke, started with a 3-month-old. So I went into corporate America, my very first job, with a 3-month-old. And I'll never forget the look on my, this was in Parkersburg, West Virginia, for whoever want to look that up. And my boss looked at me and was like, wait, we weren't expecting you with a 3-month-old, And I said, well, the child care center hasn't opened up. So I need to come in, pick my badge, and go drop off my child at the child care center. And it took another 30 minutes to drop off my daughter. And coming back to asking questions around paid leave and childcare, and what was the solution there? What are the infrastructures for care? And realizing that there was nothing. This was in 2009. And so my journey, while I was growing my career at DuPont, I was also advocating for paid parental leave for families, for childcare, for aging care support. But fast forward 10 years later, we are now in sort of Trump world, and more women are going through what I call caregiving stress, right? A lot of them are constantly seeking, solutions around all the things that we are all here talking about, whether it's abortion care, aging care, and child care. And for those who remember very vividly, COVID-19 happened, and we saw so many women out there screaming into the void, and we held space for them. And during the entire Trump administration, I lost my dad, and I said, you know what? It's time to go back home. And I took a one-way, flight down to Lagos, Nigeria. And what struck me the most was how fragmented the industry was, the care economy was. It was non-existent. It's still non-existent. But one lady stood out. She welcomed us as soon as we, got to Nigeria. We're so excited. And I have 4 kids, so I was so excited to have help. But Liz is my care worker, and she's home with my daughters right now, caring for them. And after getting to know her, realizing, how exploited and unregulated and informal this industry was. And that led me to really thinking about how do we, sort of support women in this ecosystem, a lot of them having no access to care whatsoever. We're seeing more and more Nigerian women, climbing up the corporate ladder, but what is missing is that a lot of them just don't have the time to grow their career properly. So they're starting businesses, but a lot of the businesses are small businesses, right? So those businesses are not scalable because they simply do not have the care solution to support that growth. So a lot of the work that we're doing now in Care in Africa is really looking at how do we give women time back, right? So in order for us to give women time back, we need to close the childcare gap. We need to close the aging care gap, and so on and so forth. So that's the work that we're doing.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you talk a lot about there are these wonderful policies at the national level, but as you come down to the state levels, the implementation is so spotty.
So one of the problems that we don't have in Nigeria is we don't have a policy issue. There's so many policies. I mean, you can just type it up and you find various policies around women empowerment, around child labor, etc. But what we find is that a lot of those policies are not implemented, right? So we have an implementation problem. And so one of the things that I have been saying is, as we do this work, we really need to be thinking about sustainable implementation. It can't be that we fight so hard for these policies and then we don't see it through, right, to make sure that they are implemented, even at the local and the community level. Right. So stay local, stay sustainable, because that's how we get the work done.
Yeah. Okay, Nejla, you founded your company, Global Health Visions, to really focus on policy and advocacy around women's health around the world. So I think you could give the entire session a talk on global women's health. But talk instead about what you're seeing in the United States, especially in a post-Dobbs world leading up to this election.
And following up on your point that we really need to be focusing on this continuum of care across women and girls, and under these nationalist, conservative, and populist governments, we're seeing that roll back across a whole host of things. And for us, specifically in the United States, we've seen that since Trump was elected in 2016, that he stacked the court, and the right to abortion was held in the United States under a Supreme Court law that was passed in 1973. He stacked that court, and then that court overturned it, and we heard this yesterday about how this is typical of authoritarian regimes. They're going to stack the courts, they're going to stack other places. And so they rolled back that law in 2022. And with that happening, it pushed it down to the state level, because at this moment, there is no law that defines right to abortion or no right to abortion. And so what we've seen now is the states are sort of scrambling within the first 100 days of that change. 66 clinics in 15 states closed. We now have bans or close to bans in 28 states. This affects 43% of women in reproductive age across the United States. And then the impacts extend far beyond just access to abortion, and we all have seen that in other places as well. We are seeing lack of access to contraceptive access, and then even further that we're seeing that individuals are not going into OBGYN in these states for fear, as you said as well, of being put in jail for making a decision in a health room with a woman, which is just extraordinary. On the other side, and this is what gives me a little bit of hope, I do quite a bit of local state political work and sort of watching what that means as it gets pushed down to the state. I think the Democrats were fighting this battle at the national level in the United States and forgot about the state level. And I will say that we've rallied quickly. There's still a lot of work to do, but in 2016, when Trump was elected, there were Democrats holding governorships and state legislatures in only 6 states, in sort of all blue, and the Republicans had 24. Today, that's 17 states held by Democrats and still 24 by Republicans, and the other states, that doesn't add up to the number of states we have, the others are mixed. But what that means is that we are now seeing this protection come down at the state level, and including, we have 21 states that have passed abortion constitution amendments to protect abortion. So that's hopeful. So
while we're on the political process, just keep talking and talk about what the work you did in this election and New York State's amendment.
Yeah, so I run Global Health Visions, which is a global, we do global work and global women's health, but that I do a lot of work at the local level because these things are so connected. Oftentimes in our jobs where we have so much expertise and knowledge in this room and we're working at this high level, we forget that we can not only make major impact right in our own communities and help move that change, but that they're so interconnected, right? What we see at the global level is happening right in the places where I live. And so I live in a swing district. In 2016, when Trump was elected, that was a red district with a red Republican congressperson. We have mobilized so much that in 2024, as my 15-year-old daughter, who's very upset about the election, said, it was a blue wave in a red sea. So we were able to flip a district right above us and make it boot out a Republican and put in a Democrat, and we held on to the one in a very tight district. We've also put women in power in the state Senate, in the state assembly. These were all held by Republicans. It was amazing, and I felt it was a tiny little light in a very red election, but I know and believe in the power of leaning into our own communities, understanding our ecosystem of change. And one final thing on that, we also met in secret behind the scenes when I first joined the party because it was held by men, and we flipped the party chair. And I became chair. My Democratic, we put a woman in charge of the Democratic Party at the county level, and all of those levels make change to elect more women and flip those districts. So I'm proud of that work.
I'm in a neighboring district.
We'll flip yours next.
But actually, you have a lot to say about this too, about the role of stakeholders supporting those of you who are already in office, and really also how you're integrating gender equality just into the day-to-day work that you do.
Yeah, that's quite easy. If you are aware of including women, then it's quite normal, and it comes with everything you do. And of course, I try that in my district in Vienna, and the same on global level in my global NGO, where I'm active to involve young women especially. And we really can see that makes a difference. It makes a difference to include women, and I do not want to be misunderstood. Rwanda is not a perfect state, not at all. Yeah, but there are 63% women in parliament, and when you are in Rwanda, you really can feel the difference when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education, when it comes to social ceilings. So I think it's really important to have this female idea of our experience, even recognized in the political scene. And what I really would wish from everybody is that you get in contact with your MPs, you get in contact with your politicians in your constituencies, and maybe not only if you want to criticize something, but also when you want to push something forward. We had that recently at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, where we debated in our October session a report on sex work, and it was about how sex workers can have real access to their basic human rights. And both Wanda and Beatrice, who are also at the assembly and here in the room, we all got hundreds of emails, but most of them saying, no way, we don't want to have any additional rights for sex workers, oh my God, yeah? And we got very, very few positive ones. And so, of course, we were standing for the rights of sex workers anyway, but I think if a politician who is not so much involved in an issue, he or she might think, oh, obviously the vast majority is against that, so I also vote against it. And that could be not in the best interest of women very often. So please also support your MPs, your whatever governors, whoever are really doing work for women, and not be silent when it's something good has happened or when something important has happened, not just criticize. So please reach out to us, get in touch with us. We are all human beings, we are all women, and we need our solidarity among all levels.
Yeah, your voice matters. And it goes without saying, but research obviously has shown the very strong correlation between female political participation and better outcomes for women's health. So as we turn to close, give us your vision, Blessing, your hope for the revolution in the care economy of Africa, and for all of us to see the hopeful future that you envision.
Absolutely. I think that one of the critical levers that we have, I like to think about the work that we do as, closing the care gap. We're on a mission to close the care gap for women, for families, and economies in Africa. And the two biggest levers that I see is really elevating care workers, right? Elevating the caregiving workforce so that women can have access to, to time that they can then turn around and invest in their own well-being. Because we get so many emails and text messages from women that say, I'm tired, I can't do this anymore, I want to kill myself, I want to just end it. And this is because a lot of these women are being crushed under the burden of care. And so how do we give these women time back so they can invest in their own careers and their own business? The second lever is really the childcare gap. We know we want women to work, but we know women cannot work without childcare. So how do we strengthen existing childcare models, whether that is, the nannies, the drivers, childcare centers, community childcare centers. For example, I spoke to a lady in one of the local government, and she said, we literally have, moms dropping off babies at a little kiosk. So, I mean, I don't know if you've seen those little kiosks, and it's like literally 1 square foot and 6 kids or 7 kids for 200 naira a day are stuck in there. You know,
And 200 naira is what?
200 naira is, I don't even think it's up to a cent, right? And so these are the issues. So for me, I think what really gives me hope is that, one, we can actually start bringing this economy together, whether it's the childcare economy or, you know, the care workforce economy, bringing that economy together, aggregating them, and then building that power, right, to advocate for real change. I think the biggest barrier that we have right now is the lack of representation in leadership, because we don't have women in positions of power. It makes it really, really tough to fight for a lot of these things. So we go out there and we say, oh, we want childcare, we want this, we want that. And they're like, wait, what? Yeah. Because we've just always assumed that women would do this work and that they would do it for free.
Right. So back to the themes. We are out of time. I know this could go on for a long time, but I do think you've all given us hope for the power of local action, global solidarity. And yesterday at the session that you hosted, Nejla, there was Lori Adelson, who runs Planned Parenthood Global, said the opposition's worst nightmare is this room right now. So I think
yes, I would just say that I think there's so much expertise and knowledge and wisdom and power in this room, and then imagine that extending to all of our networks. And so to really understand our ecosystem of change, both locally where we live as well as at the global level, and to really understand that we're an orchestra to make that change. Sometimes we're a diplomat, some of us are advocates, some of us are activists, but we have to work together and support each other.
And sometimes even be nightmares. That's good for some people.
Right.
With that,
good trouble.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you.